The gunshot shattered the stained glass behind the altar. I threw myself sideways as colored fragments rained down like deadly confetti, my black dress catching on the edge of the pew. Around me, mourners screamed and scattered, their grief transforming instantly into terror. My father's casket, still closed, still draped in white roses, sat exposed at the front of the church, and all I could think was, they won't even let him rest in peace. "Stay down!" A hand gripped my shoulder, forcing me behind the heavy oak pew. I looked up into eyes so dark they were almost black, set in a face that could have been carved from marble. The man crouching over me was tall, intimidatingly so, with broad shoulders that blocked out the chaos behind him. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my rent and moved with the fluid grace of someone intimately familiar with violence. I'd never seen him before in my life. "Who?" I started, but he pressed a finger to his lips, then gestured sharply to two men flanking the side entrance. They moved like shadows, weapons appearing in their hands as if materialized from thin air. Professional, efficient, terrifying. Another shot rang out, this one splintering the wooden cross above my father's casket. My breath caught. They were shooting at him, at a dead man. What kind of message was that? "We need to move. Now!" The stranger's voice was low, commanding, with an accent I couldn't quite place, something Mediterranean mixed with years of American English. He didn't wait for my agreement, simply gripped my elbow and hauled me up, keeping his body between me and the shattered window. "I'm not going anywhere with you," I hissed, trying to wrench free. "I don't even know who you are." His jaw tightened. "Dante Marchetti. And right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and whoever's trying to send you to join your father." The name hit me like ice water. Marchetti. I'd heard it whispered in my father's study late at night, seen it in the newspapers alongside words like alleged and organized crime and under investigation. The Marchetti family wasn't just mafia. They were the mafia in the Northeast, the kind of power that made politicians nervous and federal prosecutors wake up in cold sweats. "My father would never," I began, but Dante was already moving, pulling me toward a side door I'd barely noticed. His men had formed a protective corridor, faces grim and alert. "Your father did a lot of things you don't know about, Isabel." The use of my name stopped me cold. "And now his debts are coming due." We burst through the door into the gray October afternoon. 3 black SUVs waited at the curb, engines running, windows tinted so dark they looked like voids. Dante pushed me toward the middle vehicle, his hand never leaving my arm. I dug my heels into the concrete. Behind us, I could hear sirens approaching, shouts from inside the church. My Aunt Rosa would be hysterical. My younger brother Michael, God, where was Michael? "My brother," I said desperately. "Already secured. He's in the first car." Dante's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Miss Romano, people are shooting at your father's funeral. This isn't a debate." "Then answer one question." I planted my feet, meeting those obsidian eyes. "Why are you helping me?" Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or respect. He reached into his jacket, and every instinct screamed at me to run, but I held my ground. When his hand emerged, he wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a ring. It was beautiful in an antique way, white gold or platinum, set with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. The kind of ring that spoke of old money and older traditions. The kind of ring that should have been in a museum or a safety deposit box, not in the palm of a mafia boss at my father's funeral. "This was meant for you," Dante said quietly. The chaos around us seemed to fade, the sirens and shouts becoming distant background noise. "Your father and I had an arrangement. He died before he could fulfill his end, but the agreement stands." I stared at the ring, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing, what he was implying. "What kind of arrangement?" His thumb traced the edge of the sapphire, almost reverent. "The kind that keeps you and your brother alive. The kind that settles a debt that goes back 20 years. The kind that requires you to trust me, even though every instinct you have is screaming that I'm dangerous." "Are you?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Dangerous?" Dante's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Extremely, But not to you, not anymore. He held out the ring. Your father borrowed something very valuable from my family. Money, yes, but more than that, protection. Safety. The Marchetti name meant no one touched Antonio Romano or his children, until someone did. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I desperately didn't want to see. My father's late-night meetings. The way he'd insisted I learn Italian, take self-defense classes, always be aware of my surroundings. The look in his eyes these past 6 months, haunted, afraid, guilty. The car accident, I whispered. It wasn't an accident. No, Dante's voice was granite. And the people who killed him think his debt died with him. They're wrong. More shots echoed from inside the church, not aimed at us now, but the sound of return fire. Dante's men were handling the shooters. How many people carried guns to a funeral? Everyone, apparently, when your father owed the Mafia. So what? My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry today, wouldn't show weakness. What does this ring mean? What are you asking me to do? Dante stepped closer, and I realized just how tall he actually was. At least 6'3", maybe taller, with a presence that seemed to fill the space between us. This close, I could see the faint scar along his jawline, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He wasn't young, maybe late 30s, but he wore his years like armor. I'm not asking, he said, but his tone was almost gentle. Your father offered you in marriage to seal our agreement, a union between the Romano and Marchetti families. It's old-fashioned, I know, medieval even, but in our world these bonds still mean something. They mean protection. They mean no one can touch you without starting a war they can't win. Marriage to a mafia boss, to a man I'd met 5 minutes ago during a shootout at my father's funeral. I should have laughed, should have told him he was insane, that we weren't living in some gothic romance where women were bartered like property. But I'd grown up on the edges of this world, never fully in it, but never fully out either. I knew how it worked. I knew that in the circles my father had moved in, a promise was binding. A debt unpaid was a death sentence. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dante's expression didn't change, but something dark moved behind his eyes. Then whoever killed your father will come for you and Michael within the week. They'll make it look like an accident or a robbery, or maybe they won't bother with subtlety at all. Your bodies will be a message. The Romano family is finished. Their protection is void. Their name means nothing. He held the ring out again, balanced on his palm like an offering, or a trap. Put this on, become my wife, and you have the full weight of the Marchetti family behind you. No one will dare touch you. Michael finishes college, lives his life, never has to know the details of what his father was involved in. You both get to survive this. As your property, I said bitterly. As my wife. He said it with such conviction that I almost believed he saw a difference. I'm not asking you to love me, Isabel. I'm asking you to let me keep you alive. A cop car squealed around the corner, lights flashing. We were out of time. Inside the church, the shooting had stopped. Either Dante's men had won, or everyone was dead. Neither option was comforting. I thought of Michael, barely 19, starting his sophomore year at Columbia. Michael with his easy smile and terrible jokes, who still didn't know why Dad had really died, who thought it was just bad luck and bad breaks. Michael, who had his whole life ahead of him. I thought of my father in that casket, surrounded by flowers and lies. What had he been thinking, making this kind of deal? Had he planned to tell me? Or had he hoped to find another way out before time ran out? I thought of the alternative. Running, hiding, looking over my shoulder for the rest of what would probably be a very short life. My hand moved before my brain could overthink it. I took the ring from Dante's palm, the metal cool against my fingers. It was heavier than I expected. The weight of generations, and obligations and promises, I didn't fully understand. This doesn't mean I trust you, I said. Good. Dante gestured to the SUV, and the door swung open, revealing Michael in the back seat, white-faced and shaking but alive. Trust should be earned. We'll have time for that. I started to slide the ring onto my right hand, but Dante caught my wrist. His grip was firm but surprisingly gentle. Without a word, he guided the ring to my left hand instead. Fourth finger. The diamond glinted in the gray afternoon light as it settled into place, a perfect fit. How did he know my size? How long? I asked as he handed me into the vehicle beside my brother. How long has my father been planning this? Dante's expression was unreadable as he leaned against the doorframe, blocking out the world beyond. Behind him, his men were efficiently corralling the remaining mourners, creating a perimeter. The cops were still 3 blocks away, their sirens wailing impotently. "You were born," he said simply. "Your father saved my life 20 years ago when we were both different men. He asked for nothing in return except that if he ever needed help, I would answer. 6 months ago, he called in that debt. The terms were specific protection for his family, secured through a marriage bond. He showed me your picture, told me about your graduate degree in art history, your love of old movies, your habit of correcting people's grammar." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "He was very proud of you." My throat tightened. Then why didn't he tell me himself? Because he hoped he wouldn't have to. He was trying to buy his way out of the mess he'd gotten into, clear his debts another way. He ran out of time. Dante straightened, preparing to close the door. "Your father was a good man in a bad situation, Isabel. He did what he thought he had to do to save you. Now it's my job to make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain." He started to shut the door, but I stopped him with a question I knew I'd regret asking. "What did you say when he proposed this arrangement? When he offered his daughter to a stranger?" Dante's dark eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable in them, something almost human beneath the Mafia boss exterior. I said yes before he finished asking. His voice was low enough that only I could hear. I'd been waiting 20 years to repay Antonio Romano. I just never imagined the payment would be this. The door closed, sealing me in darkness beside my brother. Through the tinted windows, I watched Dante move to the lead vehicle, his phone already at his ear, issuing orders in rapid Italian. The SUVs pulled away from the curb in formation, leaving my father's funeral behind. The shattered windows, the bullet holes, the body of a man whose secrets had followed him even into death. Michael grabbed my hand, his fingers cold and trembling. "Belle, what the hell is happening? Who are those people? Why were they shooting? Where are we going?" I looked down at the ring on my finger, the sapphire catching the light as we turned a corner, and the church disappeared from view. How did I explain to my baby brother that our father had sold me to the Mafia to save our lives? How did I tell him that the man in the lead car was now, technically, my fiancé? How did I admit that some part of me, some dark, secret part, felt safer in this convoy of armed criminals than I had in months? "It's complicated," I said finally, which was both true and completely inadequate. Michael's laugh was bordering on hysterical. "Complicated? Belle, someone just shot up Dad's funeral. That guy said you were going to marry him. How is any of this?" "Michael," I squeezed his hand, trying to channel some of Dante's commanding certainty. "I need you to trust me, just for now. Can you do that?" He stared at me, this boy I'd helped raise after Mom died, whose nightmares I'd chased away and whose homework I'd checked. He wasn't a boy anymore, hadn't been for a while, but in that moment he looked about 12 years old. "We're in trouble, aren't we?" he whispered. "Like real trouble." "Yes," I said, because he deserved honesty about at least that much. "But we're going to be okay, I promise." I hoped I wasn't lying. The SUV turned onto the highway, heading north out of the city. I watched the familiar streets blur past, the bodega where Dad used to buy his coffee, the park where Michael had learned to ride a bike, the library where I'd spent countless hours researching my thesis on Renaissance art. My whole life, contained in a few square miles of pavement and memory. All of it behind me now. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out to find a text from an unknown number. "There's a safe house in Connecticut. 2 hours. We'll talk when we arrive. Don't call anyone. Don't tell anyone where you are. The next 48 hours are critical. DM." I stared at the initials, at the ring on my finger, at my brother's frightened face. 48 hours ago, I'd been worried about my thesis defense, about whether I'd have time to visit Dad this weekend, about the cute barista who kept giving me free pastries. Normal problems. Human problems. Now I was engaged to a mafia boss, fleeing from whoever had killed my father, wearing a ring that felt like both a promise and a prison sentence. This was meant for you. The words echoed in my head as Connecticut got closer with every mile. What had my father seen when he looked at me? A daughter to protect, a bargaining chip, a sacrifice he was willing to make to settle old debts and older sins. And what had Dante Marchetti seen when my father showed him my picture? A duty to fulfill, an obligation to honor, or something else, something he hadn't said in that moment by the SUV, but that had flickered across his face when he'd slipped the ring onto my finger. I leaned my head against the cool window glass and closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I kept seeing that moment. Dante's hand on mine, the ring sliding into place with impossible precision, the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious rather than something owed. I'd been waiting 20 years to repay Antonio Romano. I just never imagined the payment would be this. What did that mean? And why did my treacherous heart skip a beat when I remembered the way he'd said it? Outside, the city gave way to suburbs, then to stretches of forest and farmland. Inside, I sat with my brother's hand in mine and a stranger's ring on my finger, driving toward a future I couldn't predict and didn't understand. But I was alive. We were both alive. For my father's sake, for all he'd sacrificed and all he'd hidden, I would stay that way. Even if it meant marrying a monster. Even if it meant becoming something I'd never planned to be. Even if it meant walking into the darkness and hopping that Dante Marchetti's promise of protection was worth more than my freedom. The ring caught the light again as we passed under an overpass, sapphire blue like deep water, like secrets, like the eyes of a man who'd said he was dangerous but not to me. Not anymore. I could only hope he was telling the truth. The safe house wasn't what I expected. I'd been picturing something out of a crime thriller, a dingy apartment with boarded windows, or maybe a warehouse filled with crates and suspicious stains. Instead, the SUVs turned onto a tree-lined private road that wound through manicured grounds before revealing a sprawling estate that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. Stone and glass and modern lines, perched on a hill overlooking Long Island Sound. The sunset painted everything gold and crimson, beautiful and surreal. "This is a safe house," Michael breathed, pressing his face to the window. I didn't answer. I was watching Dante emerge from the lead vehicle, phone still pressed to his ear, his movements efficient and controlled. Even from a distance, he commanded attention. The way his men oriented toward him, awaiting orders, the way he surveyed the grounds with the assessment of someone who saw threats in shadows. Our SUV doors opened, and a woman appeared. She was maybe 50, with steel-gray hair pulled into a sleek bun and the kind of face that suggested she'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. Her black dress was simple but elegant, and she moved with the quiet authority of someone who ran things. "Miss Romano, Mr. Romano, I'm Teresa Gallo. I manage Mr. Marchetti's household." Her voice was crisp, accent pure Brooklyn. "You'll be staying in the East Wing. Your belongings have been brought from your apartments." "Our belongings," I started, then stopped. Of course they had. These people had planned for everything, probably had been watching us for months. The thought made my skin crawl. "How long have you been in my apartment?" Teresa's expression didn't change. "Long enough to pack appropriately." "You'll find everything you need. Dinner is at 8. Mr. Marchetti expects you both." She turned and walked toward the house, clearly expecting us to follow. Michael looked at me, his earlier panic settling into a kind of numb confusion. I knew the feeling. "Come on," I said, linking my arm through his. "Let's at least see where they've put us before we start planning our escape." "Are we planning an escape?" he asked hopefully. I thought of the shooters at the church, the way Dante's men had moved with lethal precision, the ring heavy on my finger. Let's call it a contingency plan. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. Soaring ceilings, original artwork that made my art historian heart skip a beat, furniture that managed to be both minimalist and luxurious. But underneath the elegance, I noticed the details. Cameras in every corner, windows with security film, doors that were probably reinforced steel beneath their wooden veneer. A fortress dressed as a home. Teresa led us down a hallway lined with abstract paintings, actual Ruthkas, unless I was very mistaken, to a suite of rooms that could have housed a family of 6. 2 bedrooms connected by a shared living space, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sound, a bathroom with a tub that could double as a small pool. "Your things are unpacked," Teresa said, gesturing to the closets. "If you need anything, use the house phone, extension 7. She left before we could respond, her footsteps silent on the hardwood floors. Michael immediately went to the windows, testing them. "Locked," he reported. "But not barred. 3rd floor, though, we'd need a rope or—" "Michael," I sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the funeral, the shooting, the drive was draining away, leaving me hollow. "We're not breaking out tonight." "But we could." "And go where?" I pulled off my heels, my feet screaming in relief. "Back to our apartments, where whoever killed Dad knows exactly where to find us. To the police, Huv been investigating the Machatas for years and would love to use us as leverage. To friends who'd be endangered just by association." Michael slumped against the window. "So we're prisoners." "We're protected." The word tasted like ash. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I didn't have an answer for that. Instead, I went to my assigned bedroom and opened the closet. Teresa hadn't been lying, everything was there. My clothes arranged by type and color, my jewelry box, my books, even my laptop. On the bed lay a garment bag I didn't recognize. Inside was a dress. Deep emerald green silk that shimmered in the fading light, designer label, my exact size. A note was pinned to the hanger in strong, masculine handwriting. "For dinner. If you prefer something else, Teresa can accommodate. DM." I held the dress up to the mirror. It was beautiful, the kind of thing I'd admire in store windows but never buy for myself. The kind of thing that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. The kind of thing a man bought for a woman he wanted to impress. Or control. I should have been angry, should have rejected it on principle, worn my own clothes as an assertion of independence. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the elegant simplicity of the note, the option to refuse. Maybe it was the realization that dinner with Dante Machotti was going to be a negotiation, and I needed every advantage I could get. Maybe I just wanted to feel beautiful one more time before my life became something unrecognizable. I showered away the day, the church, the gunfire, the fear, and let the hot water run until the bathroom filled with steam. When I finally emerged and slipped into the green dress, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The woman looking back was sophisticated, elegant, dangerous in her own way. A woman who could sit across from a Mafia boss and not flinch. I hoped. A knock at the suite door made me jump. Michael called out that he'd get it, and I heard him speaking to someone in low tones. When I emerged from the bedroom, I found him holding a box. "Delivery for you," he said, eyebrows raised. "From the boss man himself." Inside the box, nestled in tissue paper, were shoes. Emerald heels that matched the dress perfectly, and my breath caught comfortable flats in soft leather in case I preferred those instead. The note this time was even shorter. "Your choice, always." "He's very thoughtful for a kidnapper," Michael observed. "We haven't been kidnapped. I chose the flats, a small rebellion. We've been recruited." "Is that what we're calling forced marriage now?" I met my brother's eyes. He was trying for sarcasm, but I could see the fear underneath. "I need you to understand something, Michael. Whatever happens with Dante Machotti, whatever I have to do, it's to keep you safe. You finish college, you live your life, you don't look back. That's the deal." "Belle, promise me," I gripped his shoulders. "Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Don't try to play hero, don't try to investigate Dad's death, don't try to get revenge, just be normal, be safe. Let me handle this." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him. "Fine, but I'm not leaving you alone with him tonight." "Michael." "Non-negotiable, Belle. You want me to stay safe and normal. Fine, but you don't go into the lion's den without backup. I should have argued, should have protected him from even this much exposure to Dante's world. But the truth was, I didn't want to face dinner alone. Didn't want to sit across from the man I was supposed to marry and pretend I wasn't terrified. Okay, I said, we'll go together. Teresa collected us at 8 sharp, leading us through the house to a dining room that managed to be intimate despite its size. A table set for 3, candles flickering, wine already poured. And at the head of the table, Dante Machutti. He'd changed from his funeral suit into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with scars I hadn't noticed earlier. His hair was still damp from a shower, and without the suit jacket, he looked somehow more dangerous, raw power barely contained by civilization. He stood when we entered, and I remembered again just how tall he was, how he seemed to fill the space around him. Isabel, Michael. His eyes traveled over me, pausing on the flats. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Thank you for joining me. Please sit. Did we have a choice? Michael asked, too sharp, too young. Dante's expression didn't change. Yes, Teresa could have brought dinner to your rooms, but I thought we should talk, clear the air, address questions you undoubtedly have. He gestured to the chairs. This works better as a conversation than an interrogation. I sat, and Michael reluctantly followed. Dante remained standing long enough to pour water into our glasses, a surprisingly domestic gesture, before taking his own seat. I'll start with the obvious, he said. You want to know who killed your father and why? Among other things, I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Dante took a sip of wine, considering his words. Your father had business dealings with several organizations. Most were legitimate, his import company, his investments. Some were less so. 6 months ago, he witnessed something he shouldn't have. A meeting between 2 families trying to forge an alliance. One of those families decided he was a liability. Which family? Michael demanded. The Volkovs, Russian Britva operating out of Brighton Beach. Dante's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. They've been trying to expand their territory, move into operations traditionally controlled by Italian families. Your father's testimony could have complicated those plans. So they killed him, I said flatly. They tried to frighten him first. Threats, pressure, offers of money to disappear. When Ntunpa refused to run, when he came to me for protection instead, they decided to send a message. Dante's jaw tightened. The car accident was meant to look random. The funeral shooting was meant to intimidate anyone else who might consider betraying them. The food arrived then, carried by silent staff who placed plates in front of us and disappeared. I couldn't have said what we were eating. My appetite had vanished somewhere around car accident was meant to look random. Why didn't my father go to the police? Michael asked. Dante's smile was humorless. Because the Volkovs have police on their payroll. Because the FBI investigation would have exposed all of Ntunpa's dealings, legitimate and otherwise. Because he knew that in our world, the only real protection comes from power, not law. He looked at me. He came to me because 20 years ago, I owed him a life debt. And because he knew that a marriage alliance between our families would make you untouchable. How romantic, I said dryly. Romance has nothing to do with it. Dante's dark eyes held mine. This is about survival, about honoring debts and protecting what's yours. Your father understood that. I need you to understand it too. And if I don't, I pushed my plate away. If I refuse to play along with this medieval arrangement, then you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. The Volkovs won't stop because your father's dead. They'll want to ensure his entire family is eliminated, no loose ends. They already tried today. They'll try again. Dante leaned forward. But if you're my wife, you're under Marchetti protection. Harming you means war with one of the most powerful families in the Northeast. The Volkovs aren't strong enough for that fight. They'll back off. How convenient for you, Michael said. You get a wife out of the deal. I get a complication. Dante's voice was sharp. I get a woman who doesn't want to be here, doesn't trust me, and will probably spend our entire marriage plotting ways to escape. I get a brother-in-law who looks at me like I'm the devil himself. I get questions from my own people about why I'm honoring a deal with a dead man when I could just let nature take its course. He stood abruptly, walking to the window. I'm doing this because I owed Antonio Romano everything. Because without him, I'd have been dead 20 years ago, and none of this, none of my family's success, my position, my life, would exist. This is the last thing I can do for him. The rawness in his voice surprised me. This wasn't the controlled mafia boss from the church. This was something more human, more real. What did my father do? I asked quietly. To save you. Dante was silent for a long moment, his back to us, shoulders tense. When he spoke, his voice was distant. I was 17. Stupid, arrogant, thought I was invincible. I went after a rival family's operation without my father's approval, got captured, got beaten within an inch of my life. They were going to kill me as a message to my father. Antonio was doing business in the area, saw them dragging me into a warehouse. He could have walked away, should have walked away. Instead, he called my father, stalled my captors, even took a bullet in the shoulder getting me out. He turned back to face us. That bullet still bothered him in cold weather. Every winter, I was reminded of what he sacrificed for a stupid kid he didn't even know. I thought of my father's shoulder, the old injury he'd always brushed off as a construction accident from his youth. Another lie, another secret. So this marriage is guilt, I said. This marriage is honor. Dante returned to the table but didn't sit. In my world, that means something. It means when I make a promise, I keep it. When I offer protection, I deliver it. When I take a wife, I'm bound to her completely, irrevocably. This isn't some temporary arrangement, Isabel. This is for life. The weight of those words settled over the room. For life, till death do us part. Bound to a man I'd known for less than 12 hours. What if, my voice cracked and I hated it. What if I can't? What if I'm not cut out for this world? Dante studied me for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He knelt beside my chair, bringing himself to eye level. This close, I could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, the silver in his hair, the fine lines that suggested he smiled more often than his current expression suggested. You're Antonio Romano's daughter, he said quietly. He told me you once faced down 3 men harassing a woman on the subway. You have a black belt in Taekwondo. You wrote your thesis on the use of violence in Baroque art. You're not some delicate flower, Isabel. You're steel wrapped in silk. His hand covered mine, warm and solid. You can do this. The question is whether you're willing to. I looked down at our hands, his scarred and strong, mine adorned with his ring. Behind us, I could feel Michael watching, worried and protective. Beyond the windows, the sound crashed against the shore, relentless and eternal. I thought of my father, bleeding in a warehouse for a boy he didn't know. I thought of the promises we make, the debts we pay, the ways we honor those we've lost. I need conditions, I said. Dante's eyebrows rose. Conditions. If I'm doing this, if I'm becoming your wife, then I need guarantees. In writing, legally binding. I pulled my hand from under his, straightening my spine. Michael finishes college debt-free. He gets a trust fund enough to live on without ever touching your money or your world. He walks away from all of this completely. Done, Dante said without hesitation. I want my own money, my own accounts. Not an allowance, not a credit card you can cancel, actual financial independence. Reasonable, what else? I took a breath. This was the big one. I want out, not now, but eventually. A timeline. 5 years, 10 years, I don't care. But I want an end date where we can divorce quietly, no drama, no retaliation. Where I can walk away and live my own life. Something flickered across Dante's face, disappointment, hurt. It was gone too quickly to read. I can't agree to that. Then we have a problem. Not because I want to keep you prisoner, he said quickly, but because divorce in my world, it's complicated. It shows weakness, creates vulnerabilities. Other families would see it as an opportunity to strike, to exploit the division. He stood, packing. But I can promise you this. If after a reasonable time you want to live separately, we can arrange that. You'd keep the Marchetti name, the protection, but you'd have your own residence, your own life. All I'd ask is that we maintain appearances publicly. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was something. A crack in the door, a possibility of freedom. How reasonable is reasonable? I asked. 5 years. He met my eyes. 5 years of trying to make this work. If at the end of that time you truly want separate lives, I'll arrange it. You'll have security, money, freedom, everything except the ability to marry someone else. Michael made a noise of protest, but I held up my hand. 5 years. It felt like a lifetime and like nothing at all. And what do you get out of this? I asked Dante. Besides a wife who's counting down the days until she can leave. His smile was sad. I get to keep a promise to a man who saved my life. I get to protect the daughter of my greatest benefactor. I get a chance to prove that I'm not the monster you think I am. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal, Isabel? I looked at his hand, then at Michael, then at the ring already on my finger. I thought about my father in his casket, about the shooters at the church, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then I thought about Michael, safe and free, about 5 years instead of forever, about the possibility that Dante Marchetti might actually keep his word. I took his hand. We have a deal, I said, but I'm holding you to every word. His grip was firm, warm. I wouldn't expect anything less. And maybe it was my imagination, or maybe it was the candlelight, or maybe it was the wine I'd barely touched. But for just a second, when his hand clasped mine, I could have sworn I felt something more than just a business arrangement. Something that made my pulse quicken and my breath catch, something that felt dangerously like possibility. The wedding happened 48 hours later. I'd expected more time, to plan, to think, to come to terms with what I was doing. But Dante explained over breakfast the morning after our negotiation that waiting was dangerous. Every day we delayed was another day for the Volkovs to make a move, another opportunity for word to spread that the alliance wasn't sealed. Strike while they're still reeling from the funeral, he'd said, cutting into his eggs with surgical precision. Show them we're united before they can organize a proper response. So there I was, standing in front of a floor-length mirror in Teresa's capable hands, wearing a dress that had appeared overnight like something from a fairy tale. Cream silk, vintage lace, fitted to my body as though it had been made for me, which, knowing Dante's thoroughness, it probably had been. You look beautiful, Cara, Teresa said, adjusting my veil. Her tone was warm, almost maternal. Mr. Marchetti will be very pleased. Mr. Marchetti is getting what he paid for, I said, sharper than I intended. Teresa's hands stilled on my shoulders. In the mirror, her eyes met mine. He's getting far more than that, and I think you know it. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Michael stood there in a suit that actually fit him for once, his expression somewhere between protective fury and resignation. The judge is here, he said, and about 50 of Dante's people. Witnesses, Teresa corrected. In our world, a marriage must be seen to be believed. Our world, as if I belonged to it already. The ceremony took place in the library, all dark wood and leather-bound books, a room that smelled of old paper and older money. Dante stood at the front in a black suit that probably cost more than a semester of my graduate school, his expression unreadable. Behind him, rows of men in similarly expensive suits watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to approval to barely concealed skepticism. I recognized some faces from the news. Carlo Benedetti, underboss of the Marchetti family, built like a tank with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Marco Santoro, head of their financial operations, whose eyes were cold as winter. And others whose names I didn't know but whose danger I could feel like a physical presence. These were the people I was marrying into. These were my new family. The thought made my steps falter. Dante's eyes found mine across the room, and something in his expression steadied me. Not warmth exactly, but solidarity, recognition. We were both doing what we had to do. I made it down the makeshift aisle without tripping, which felt like a victory. Michael gave my hand one last squeeze before stepping aside, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. The judge, clearly used to performing ceremonies for people who valued discretion over romance, kept it brief. The standard words, the traditional vows, all delivered with the passion of a DMV employee processing renewals. Do you, Isabel Marie Romano, take Dante Alessandro Marchetti to be your lawfully wedded husband? I looked at Dante, really looked at him. This man who'd appeared at my father's funeral with a ring and a promise, who'd negotiated with me instead of commanding, who'd given me choices, even limited ones, when he could have given me nothing. I do, I said. His eyes darkened with something I couldn't read. Do you, Dante Alessandro Marchetti, take Isabel Marie Romano to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation. His voice was firm, certain, like he'd been waiting his whole life to say those words. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The judge closed his book with a snap. You may kiss the bride. I hadn't thought about this part. Hadn't prepared for the moment when Dante would step closer, when his hand would cup my face with surprising gentleness, when his thumb would trace my cheekbone like I was something precious. May I? He asked quietly, just for me. The fact that he asked, that he gave me this choice too, undid something in my chest. I nodded. His kiss was nothing like I expected. Not possessive or demanding, but soft, almost reverent. His lips barely brushed mine, a whisper of contact that somehow felt more intimate than anything that had come before. I could feel the restraint in him, the careful control, like he was holding back an ocean of feeling. When he pulled away, his eyes were molten. Mrs. Marchetti, he said, and the name sent a shiver down my spine. The witnesses erupted in applause. Men who probably had bodies buried in their pasts, who lived by violence and codes I didn't understand, celebrating like this was a real wedding. Like this was love. Maybe, for them, it was close enough. The reception was held in the mansion's ballroom, because of course there was a ballroom. Champagne flowed, a string quartet played, and I smiled until my face ached while being introduced to an endless parade of dangerous men and their calculating wives. The Marchetti family is honored to welcome you, said one woman whose diamonds could probably fund a small country. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Though I confess, we were all surprised by the suddenness of the union. When you know, Dante said smoothly, his hand resting possessively on my lower back. Why wait? Indeed, her gaze swept over me, assessing. Your father must have been so pleased. Oh, my apologies, how thoughtless of me. The reminder of my father's death landed like a slap. I felt Dante tense beside me. My father gave his blessing before he passed, I said, keeping my voice level. This marriage honors his wishes. How dutiful, she smiled again, shark-like. I hope you'll be very happy. As she walked away, I felt Dante's hand tighten briefly on my back. That was Sofia Caruso, he murmured. Her family has been trying to arrange a marriage between me and her daughter for 5 years. You've just made a powerful enemy. Perfect. Add it to the list. I reached for another glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Easy. Dante's hand covered mine on the glass. You need to stay sharp tonight. Why? Afraid I'll embarrass you. Afraid you'll miss the signs if something goes wrong. His eyes scanned the room, never still. This many family members in one place, this much champagne flowing, it's a powder keg waiting for a spark. As if summoned by his words, the music stopped abruptly. The crowd parted and 4 men entered the ballroom. They weren't dressed for a wedding. They were dressed for business, dark suits, harder edges, movements that screamed military training. Leading them was a man who made everyone else in the room look soft. Tall, broad-shouldered, with platinum blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. A scar ran from his temple to his jaw, and when he smiled, it was the smile of a predator who just spotted prey. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dante Marchetti, the man said, his accent thick with Russian vowels. Congratulations on your marriage. How unfortunate that we weren't invited to the ceremony. Dante stepped in front of me, subtle but protective. Alexei Volkov, you weren't invited because you're not welcome in my home. Your home, Alexei's smile widened. This is still America, yes, free country, and I have business to discuss with the new Mrs. Marchetti. Behind me, I heard the distinctive sound of safeties clicking off. Dante's men were armed. Of course they were armed. This was a mafia wedding. You have no business with my wife, Dante said, his voice deadly quiet. But I did have business with her father. Alexei pulled a photograph from his jacket, holding it up. Even from a distance, I could see it was my father, standing outside our family home. Antonio Romano owed us quite a bit of money before his unfortunate accident, debts that don't disappear simply because the debtor is dead. My blood turned to ice. That's a lie. My father's business with you was more complicated than your new husband told you, I think. Alexei's eyes found mine over Dante's shoulder. Did he tell you about the shipment your father lost? The merchandise that went missing under his watch? $2 million of our property vanished. And then, how convenient, he dies before he can pay us back. He told me about your threats, I said, stepping out from behind Dante despite his warning hand. How you tried to intimidate him into silence about your illegal operations. Illegal? Alexei laughed. This from the daughter of a man who smuggled art through his import business for 20 years. Tell me, Isabel, may I call you Isabel? Did you really believe all those paintings in your childhood home were purchased legitimately? The room spun. Paintings, my father's import business, the art I'd grown up surrounded by that had sparked my love of art history. That's enough. Dante's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. You've delivered your message, Alexei. Now leave before this wedding reception becomes a funeral. So dramatic. Alexei tucked the photo away. I'm simply here to inform the new bride of her inheritance. $2 million, Mrs. Marchetti, payable within 30 days, or will be forced to collect in other ways. His eyes raked over me. Though I'm sure we could negotiate alternative arrangements, you're quite beautiful, and my organization always has use for. Dante moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment he was beside me, the next he had Alexei by the throat, slammed against the wall, a gun pressed under his chin. Finish that sentence, Dante said softly, and I'll paint these walls with your brain. Alexei's men reached for their weapons, but they were immediately surrounded by Marchetti's soldiers. 20 guns pointed at 4. The math was clear. This is how you honor marriage vows, Alexei choked out, his face reddening. With violence at your own reception. This is how I honor my wife. Dante pressed the gun harder. By making it very clear what happens to anyone who disrespects her. Your father and I have an understanding, Alexei. Our families don't interfere in each other's business. But if you threaten Isabel again, if you so much as speak her name without my permission, that understanding ends. And your family isn't strong enough to survive what comes next. Big words. Alexei's smile was strained. But Romano's debt is mine now. As his son-in-law, I assume all his obligations. Dante released him abruptly. Send me the documentation. I'll verify the amount, and if it's legitimate, it will be paid. Through proper channels, with lawyers and accountants and everything nice and legal. But you don't threaten my wife, ever. Alexei straightened his jacket, his eyes cold with fury. Your father would never have made such a rash decision over a woman. My father isn't here. Dante's smile was sharp as a blade. I am, and in case the message isn't clear, Isabel Marchetti is under my personal protection. Harm her, threaten her, or inconvenience her in any way, and I will burn your entire organization to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. He gestured to the door. Now get out of my house before I forget I'm supposed to be in a good mood today. Alexei looked like he wanted to argue, but the 20 guns pointed at him suggested that would be unwise. He nodded curtly, then looked past Dante to me. Enjoy your marriage, Mrs. Marchetti, he said, however long it lasts. Then he and his men were gone, leaving a wake of tension thick enough to cut. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Dante's hand found mine, gripping tight. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I was shaking, I realized, my whole body trembling with adrenaline and shock and the horrible realization that I knew so little about my own father. Art smuggling, missing merchandise, $2 million. Did you know, I whispered, about the paintings, about what my father really did? Dante's jaw tightened. Some of it, not all. Antonio kept many secrets even from me. But you knew enough to know that my entire childhood was built on. I couldn't finish. Couldn't process that the man I'd mourned, the father I'd loved, was someone else entirely. Your childhood was built on love, Dante said firmly. Whatever else Antonio did, however he earned his money, he loved you and Michael completely. That was real, Isabel. Everything else is just context. Context? I laughed, bordering on hysterical. My father was a criminal. You're a criminal. I'm now married into a crime family and apparently owe the Russian Mafia $2 million. That's not context, Dante. That's my entire life unraveling. His hands cupped my face, forcing me to look at him. The ballroom, the guests, all of it faded away until it was just us. Listen to me, he said. You are not responsible for your father's choices. You are not defined by his debts or his secrets. You are Isabel Marchetti now, and that name carries weight, protection, power. Whatever the Volkovs think they're owed, whatever games they're playing, they go through me now. Not you, me. You can't just... I can, I will. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones. This is what marriage means in our world, Isabel. Your problems become mine. Your enemies become mine. Your father's debts become mine. You don't face any of this alone anymore. The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. This wasn't the careful negotiation from 2 days ago. This was raw, fierce, uncompromising. This was a man who meant every word. Why? I asked. Why do you care this much? It can't just be about honoring a debt to my father. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. Ask me again in 5 years, he said quietly. When you know me better, when you can trust that my answer is true. Before I could press further, Carlo Benedetti appeared at Dante's elbow. Boss, we need to talk, he said urgently. The Volkovs didn't come alone. We've got reports of their people positioned around the perimeter. This wasn't just a message, it was reconnaissance. Dante's expression hardened instantly, the gentle husband replaced by the calculating boss. How many? At least a dozen, maybe more. Carlo's eyes flicked to me apologetically. They're preparing for something. On my wedding day, Dante's voice was ice. They dare. An explosion rocked the building. The windows shattered inward, spraying glass across the ballroom. People screamed. I felt Dante tackle me to the ground, his body covering mine as debris rained down around us. My ears rang, my vision blurred. Through the smoke and chaos, I heard gunfire. The Volkovs weren't just sending a message anymore. They were going to war. And I was caught in the middle. Dante pulled me up, his face streaked with dust and blood from a cut on his forehead. Stay with me, he commanded. Whatever happens, stay close. His men were already moving, forming defensive positions, returning fire through the shattered windows. This wasn't a wedding reception anymore. It was a battlefield. And somewhere in the smoke and gunfire, I heard Alexei Volkov's voice, amplified by a megaphone. Send out the bride, Marchetti. This ends when we get what we're owed. Dante's arms tightened around me. Over my dead body, he growled. I looked up at my husband of less than 3 hours, this dangerous man who'd promised to protect me, who just declared war on the Russian Mafia rather than hand me over. Let's make sure it doesn't come to that, I said. His smile was sharp and deadly. Now you're thinking like a Marchetti. Then he kissed me hard, tasting of blood and champagne and promise, before pulling his own weapon and stepping into the fight. Our honeymoon, it seemed, would have to wait. The gunfire was deafening. Dante shoved me behind the overturned bar, his body a shield between me and the shattered windows. Around us, his men had transformed the elegant ballroom into a war zone, tables flipped for cover, weapons drawn, the string quartet's instruments abandoned in the chaos. How many? Dante shouted to Carlo, who was coordinating from behind a marble pillar. 20, maybe 25. Carlo fired 3 shots through a window, precise and controlled. They've got the east and south entrances covered, but they're spreading thin. This wasn't their plan A. Plan A was intimidation, Dante said grimly. We didn't intimidate. Another explosion rocked the grounds, smaller this time, further away. The lights flickered but held. Through the smoke, I could see Alexei's men advancing across the lawn, using the gardens for cover. Where's Michael? I grabbed Dante's arm, panic flooding through me. Where's my brother? Safe room, second floor. Dante caught my hand. Teresa got him and the non-combatants out the moment Volkov showed up. He's protected, Isabel. I promised you that. I wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. But believing meant trusting this man I'd known for less than a week, this criminal who'd become my husband in a library ceremony that felt like a lifetime ago. A bullet struck the bar above our heads, showering us with splinters. We can't stay here, I said. We're sitting ducks. Dante's eyes met mine, and I saw surprise flicker in them. You're not panicking. I'll panic later. Adrenaline sang through my veins, sharp and clarifying. Right now, we need a plan. What do the Volkovs want? You, or failing that, to make an example of us. He reloaded his weapon with practiced ease. They want to prove that marrying you didn't make you untouchable, that the Marchetti family can be challenged. Then let's prove them wrong. I looked around the ballroom, my mind racing. My dissertation had been on Baroque art, but I'd spent years studying military history as context, siege warfare, tactical positioning, psychological warfare. Theory, yes, but theory based on centuries of actual combat. They're spreading their forces thin to surround us. That means they're not expecting us to push back. You want us to attack? Carlo's voice was skeptical. We're outnumbered. We're fortified. They're exposed on the lawn. I pointed to the windows. Your men are trained, theirs are street fighters. You have the high ground, interior positions, knowledge of the terrain. Every military principle says we should have the advantage if we commit. Dante stared at me like he'd never seen me before. You studied warfare. I studied everything. My father insisted. Another piece clicking into place. My father's paranoia, his insistence that I learn to defend myself, to think strategically. He'd been preparing me for this world all along. The question is, do you have a way to hit them from behind? A slow smile spread across Dante's face. Carlo, call the perimeter team. Tell them to move in on my signal hard and fast from the north. We'll push from the ballroom, catch the Volkovs in a pincer. Boss, if this goes wrong. It won't. Dante looked at me. My wife just gave us the winning strategy. Now let's execute it. The next 10 minutes were controlled chaos. Dante coordinated with his men, positioning them at key windows, timing the assault. I stayed low, my heart hammering, watching my husband transform into something terrifying and beautiful, a commander who his men would follow into hell itself. On 3, Dante said into his radio. 1, 2, 3. The Marchetti forces erupted from the mansion. Gunfire lit up the dusk, coordinated and devastating. The Volkovs, caught between the building assault and the perimeter team flanking from behind, broke formation. I watched through the shattered window as Alexei tried to rally his men, but the tactical advantage was overwhelming. Within minutes, it was over. 8 Volkovs lay wounded on the lawn. The rest had retreated to their vehicles, engines roaring as they fled. Alexei was the last to fall back, his ice-chip eyes finding the ballroom windows, finding me with a look of pure hatred. This isn't over, Marchetti, he shouted. You'll pay for this. Dante appeared at the broken window, his weapon still drawn. Send your father my regards, he called back. Tell Viktor Volkov that if he wants war over Romano's debts, he can have it, but he should be prepared to lose everything. Alexei's response was lost in the squeal of tires as the Volkovs retreated. Silence fell over the estate, broken only by the groans of wounded men and the crackle of small fires. Dante's team moved efficiently, securing the perimeter, checking casualties, beginning the cleanup that would erase all evidence of the battle before the authorities could be bothered to investigate this far into Marchetti territory. I stood slowly, my legs shaking now that the adrenaline was fatting. My wedding dress was torn, covered in dust and debris. My veil had been lost somewhere in the chaos. I looked like I'd survived a war. Which I supposed I had. Dante turned from the window and crossed to me in 3 long strides. His hands framed my face, his eyes searching mine for injuries. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough with concern. "No, you." "I'll live." He touched the cut on his forehead absently. "Isabel, what you did, that tactical analysis." "I read a lot of books." My laugh sounded slightly hysterical. "Turns out military history has practical applications." "You're extraordinary." The words were simple, but the way he said them made my breath catch, like he meant it, like he saw me, really saw me for the first time. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "I'm covered in dust and possibly some blood that I hope isn't mine. My wedding reception just got shot up by the Russian Mafia, and I think I'm going into shock. But I needed to hold it together, so I did." "You did more than that. You may have just saved lives." He pulled me against his chest, and I let myself lean into him, let myself take comfort from this man who was still mostly a stranger, but also somehow my husband. "I'm sorry. This wasn't how today was supposed to go." "How was it supposed to go?" "Dancing, champagne, me trying to convince you that marrying me wasn't the worst decision you'd ever made." His hand stroked my hair gently. "Not guns and explosions and tactical warfare." Despite everything, I smiled against his chest. "To be fair, the tactical warfare was kind of impressive. Your men are very well trained." "They're going to love you." He pulled back enough to look at me. "Carlo's already calling you the general. You do realize you just earned serious respect in a world where women are usually decorative accessories." "I'm nobody's decoration." The words came out fiercer than I intended. "No." Dante's smile was warm, genuine, transforming his entire face. "You're definitely not." A throat cleared behind us. Teresa stood in the doorway, remarkably composed despite the destruction around her. "The safe room is secure. Your brother is asking for you, Mrs. Marchetti." Mrs. Marchetti. The name still felt foreign, but less so than it had this morning. "I'll take you to him," Dante said, keeping his arm around my waist as we navigated the debris. "Then we need to talk about what comes next." Michael launched himself at me the moment the safe room door opened, his arms crushing me in a hug that threatened my ribs. "I heard explosions," he said into my shoulder. "Teresa wouldn't let me leave, wouldn't tell me what was happening. Are you okay? Is Dante?" "We're fine, it's over." I held him tight, this boy who was all the family I had left now. "The Volkovs attacked during the reception. It got messy, but we're okay." Michael pulled back, his eyes finding Dante standing in the doorway. "You protected her." "I did." Dante's voice was quiet. "And I'll continue to, that's a promise, Michael." My brother studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I believe you." He looked at me. "So what now? We can't just go back to normal after this." "No," I agreed. "We can't." Dante stepped into the room. "Michael, there's a car waiting to take you back to Columbia. You'll have 2 guards with you at all times, subtle, invisible, but there. You finish your semester, take your exams, live your life. But you stay alert and you check in with me daily. Can you do that?" "You want me to leave? To just go back to school while Belle?" "Your sister and I need to handle some business with the Volkovs. Delicate business that works better if you're safe and accounted for." Dante's tone was firm but not unkind. "This is how you help, Michael, by being exactly where you're supposed to be, making it impossible for anyone to use you as leverage." I saw my brother struggle with it, the desire to stay and protect me warring with the logic of Dante's argument. Finally, he nodded. "Daily check-ins," he said, "and if anything happens to her." "You'll have my permission to kill me yourself," Dante finished. "Deal." Despite everything, Michael smiled. "Deal." An hour later, I watched my brother's car disappear down the drive, flanked by 2 SUVs full of guards. Dante stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my lower back. "He'll be safe," he said. "I've got my best people on him." I know, and surprisingly, I did. Whatever else Dante Marchetti was, he kept his promises. So what's this delicate business we need to handle? The debt your father supposedly owed, the $2 million. Dante turned us back toward the house. I've had my financial people digging into Volkov's claims. You want to know what they found? Tell me. The shipment that went missing, it was intercepted by the FBI. Your father didn't lose it. He helped them seize it. He'd been working with federal investigators for 6 months before his death, building a case against the Volkov operations. Dante's smile was grim. He wasn't a debtor. He was an informant. The world tilted. My father was working with the FBI. And doing a damn good job of it, from what I can tell. The Volkovs didn't kill him because he owed them money. They killed him because he was about to destroy their entire organization. We climbed the steps to the mansion, now swarming with cleanup crews. Which means the debt is fictional, a cover story to justify coming after you. So we don't owe them $2 million. We don't owe them anything, but they're going to keep pushing, keep trying to eliminate Antonio Romano's bloodline before the case goes to trial. He held the door open for me. Unless we end this, permanently. I stopped in the doorway. How? Dante's expression was dangerous. By finishing what your father started. By giving the FBI everything they need to bury the Volkovs so deep they'll never see daylight again. You'd work with the FBI. I lowered my voice. You're not exactly clean yourself. No, but I'm smart enough to know when cooperation serves my interests. He guided me toward his study, a room I hadn't seen yet, all dark wood and leather, masculine and imposing. Your father kept records, evidence. He hid it somewhere before he died, insurance against the Volkovs moving against his family. We find those records, we hand them to his FBI contact, and Viktor Volkov spends the rest of his life in federal prison. And Alexei will be too busy trying to hold his crumbling empire together to come after you. Dante crossed to a wall safe, spinning the combination. Your father was brilliant, Isabel. Dangerous and flawed and secretive, yes, but brilliant. He played a long game and we're going to win it for him. He pulled out a folder spreading photographs across his desk. Images of my childhood home, specific shots of my father's study, his bookshelves, his safe. You've been watching my family for a long time, I said slowly. 20 years. Dante met my eyes without shame. From the moment your father saved my life, I kept tabs on him, made sure he was safe. That his business thrived, that his children were protected. I knew about his deal with the Volkovs long before he came to me 6 months ago. I was waiting for him to ask for help. You were watching me. The realization sent a strange shiver through me. All those years, you knew who I was. I knew everything about you. His voice dropped, intimate and intense. Your first art history class at NYU, your thesis defense, the gallery opening where you sold your first piece of analysis. I knew you, Isabel, long before we met at your father's funeral. I should have been angry, should have felt violated by the surveillance, the invasion of privacy. But all I could think was, when you saw my picture 6 months ago, when my father proposed this marriage arrangement, you said yes before he finished asking. Yes. Why? Dante moved around the desk, closing the distance between us. Because I'd been watching you for 20 years and somewhere along the way, surveillance became fascination. Fascination became admiration. And admiration became... He stopped, jaw tight. You told me to ask you in 5 years when you could trust my answer. The same applies to me. Ask me again when this is over, when the Volkovs are gone and you're safe and you can believe I'm not just saying what you want to hear. My heart was racing. Dante. But I can tell you this much. His hand cupped my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone the way he had before our kiss at the wedding. Marrying you wasn't a duty, it was a privilege. And protecting you isn't an obligation. It's a choice I'd make 1,000 times over. I rose on my toes and kissed him. Not like the chaste kiss at our wedding, but deeply, hungrily, pouring 6 days of tension and fear and confusion and something dangerously close to trust into the contact. His arms came around me, crushing me against his chest, and he kissed me back like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were molten. We should find your father's evidence, he said roughly. Finish this. Yes, I straightened my ruined dress. We should. But after, his hand caught mine. After we talk, really talk, about what this marriage means, what it could be if we both wanted it. If we both wanted it, I echoed. No more arrangements, no more obligations. Just a choice, freely made. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing the ring he'd placed there. Deal. I thought about the man I'd met 6 days ago at my father's funeral. The stranger who'd handed me a ring and offered protection. The Mafia boss who'd negotiated instead of commanded. The husband who'd thrown himself over me when the windows exploded. The warrior who'd trusted my tactical instincts in the middle of a firefight. I thought about 5 years and what they might hold. What we might become if we gave it a chance. Deal, I said. We found my father's evidence 3 days later, hidden in a false bottom of his antique desk. The desk I'd done my homework on as a child, never knowing it held enough documentation to destroy a criminal empire. Bank records, shipping manifests, recorded conversations, photographs. Everything the FBI needed, wrapped in waterproof packaging with a note in my father's handwriting. Bella, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets, sorry for the danger, sorry I couldn't protect you the way I wanted to, but I tried to make it right. This evidence will bury the Volkovs. Give it to Agent Martinez. He'll know what to do, and trust Dante. I know this isn't the life you chose, but he's a good man. Let him love you. Let yourself be happy. You deserve that much. Dad. I read the note 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Dante's arms came around me from behind, steady and sure. He knew, I whispered. He knew he wasn't going to make it out. He knew, and he made sure you would. Dante's lips brushed my temple. He gave you me. The FBI raids happened simultaneously across 3 states. Viktor Volkov was arrested at his Brighton Beach mansion, Alexei in a hotel in Atlantic City. By the time the evening news ran the story, the Volkov empire was in ashes, their operations exposed, their people scattering. Dante and I watched the coverage from his study, my head on his shoulder, his hand playing absently with my hair. It's over, I said, still not quite believing it. It's over. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. You're safe, Michael's safe, the debt is settled. So what now? He turned to face me, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. Now we decide what we want. We made a deal 5 years before we reassess. But Isabel, I need you to know that for me, 5 years isn't going to change anything. What I feel, what I've felt since I first saw you at that gallery opening 7 years ago, it's not going away. You were at my gallery opening, my breath caught. In the back, watching you talk about Renaissance brushwork techniques with a passion that made the whole room lean in. His smile was soft. You wore a blue dress. You laughed at something the gallery owner said, and I thought, Antonio Romano's daughter is going to wreck me someday. 7 years, the timeline clicked into place. You've been. In love with you? Yes. He said it simply, like it was an obvious fact. Hopelessly, impossibly in love with a woman I couldn't approach, couldn't touch, couldn't have. And then your father gave me away, and I took it, even knowing you'd hate me at first. Even knowing I'd have to earn every scrap of trust. Because 5 years of trying to win you was better than a lifetime of watching from afar. I should have been overwhelmed, should have needed time to process. But looking at Dante, this dangerous, powerful man who'd been carrying a torch for me for 7 years, I realized I already knew my answer. I need to tell you something, I said. That tactical analysis during the attack, I was terrified the whole time, but I wasn't terrified of dying. I was terrified of you dying. Of losing you before I figured out what this was between us. I took his hand. It's only been 6 days. I'm not going to say I love you because I barely know you, but I want to know you, really know you. I want to give this a real chance. Not because you have to, he said urgently. Because you want to. Because I want to. I kissed him softly. So here's my counteroffer to your 5-year deal. We stay married. We build something real. And if somewhere along the way I fall in love with you too, and I think I might, Dante, I really think I might, then we forget about the exit clause and make this permanent. His smile was incandescent. You're negotiating our marriage terms, again. I'm good at it, I grinned. Do we have a deal? Instead of answering, he kissed me, deep and thorough and full of promise. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright. We have a deal, Mrs. Marchetti, now and always. 1 year later, I found Dante in his study, poring over shipping manifests for the legitimate parts of his business empire, the parts he'd been slowly expanding, carefully transitioning away from the darker elements of his family legacy. Michael's graduating summa cum laude, I announced, waving my phone. He got into Harvard Law. Dante looked up, grinning. That kid is going to be a terror in a courtroom. He learned from the best. I rounded the desk, sliding into Dante's lap. Also, Teresa wants to know if we're hosting Christmas this year or going to your father's place in Italy. What do you want? His arms came around my waist automatically, a gesture so familiar now it felt like breathing. I want to spend our first Christmas in our home, the one we just bought. The townhouse in the city had been my wedding anniversary gift, a place that was ours, not the family estate, not a safe house, a real home. I want Michael here and Teresa's cooking and maybe some of that eggnog that's definitely got too much rum in it. Domestic bliss from a woman who once told me she'd only stay 5 years. He kissed my neck. What changed? Everything. I turned in his arms to face him. You changed. I changed. This changed. I touched the ring on my finger, the sapphire he'd given me at my father's funeral, now joined by a wedding band we'd chosen together on our 6-month anniversary. Turns out falling in love with your arranged husband is surprisingly easy when he's patient and kind and makes you laugh and looks at you like you're the most fascinating thing in his world. You are the most fascinating thing in my world. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was obvious. Have been for 8 years, will be for the next 80 if I'm lucky. 80 years, I raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. I'm an ambitious man. His hand moved to rest on my stomach. We're a secret neither of us had spoken out loud yet waited. Especially now. I froze. How did you? You stopped drinking wine 3 weeks ago. You've been tired. And this morning I saw the pregnancy test box in the bathroom trash. His eyes searched mine, vulnerable and hopping. Were you going to tell me? Tonight, I was planning this whole thing, dinner, candles, the works. I covered his hand with mine. Are you? Is this okay? I know we haven't talked about kids yet and it's soon and... He kissed me silent. It's perfect. You're perfect. All of this is so far beyond anything I imagined when I handed you that ring. He rested his forehead against mine. I love you, Isabel Marchetti. I've loved you for 8 years and I'll love you for 80 more. You and our family and this life we're building. I love you too. The words came easily now, true and certain. Even if you are a bossy, overprotective, surprisingly sentimental mafia boss. Former mafia boss, he corrected. I'm going legitimate, remember? For our kids, for you, for the future. Former mafia boss, I agreed, smiling. Who still has 50 armed guards and a distressing collection of weapons. Security consultants and collector's items. His grin was unrepentant. Some habits die hard. I kissed him, long and sweet, tasting like promise and future, and the life we'd built from chaos and obligation, and a ring handed over at a funeral. My father had called it an arrangement, a debt, a duty. But looking at Dante, feeling his hand protective over our growing child, surrounded by the life we'd chosen together, I knew the truth. This wasn't an arrangement. This was love. And I'd choose it, choose him, every day for the rest of our lives. Come on, I said, pulling him to his feet. We have to call Michael and tell him he's going to be an uncle. He's going to freak out. In a good way. In the best way. I laced my fingers through his. Everything about this is the best way. As we walked out of the study together, Dante's arm around my shoulders, mine around his waist, I caught sight of the photo on his desk. The one from our real wedding. The one we'd had 6 months after the rushed ceremony, with Michael walking me down the aisle and actual vows we'd written ourselves, and a kiss that had made the guests whistle and cheer. In the photo, we were both laughing, faces pressed together, ridiculously happy. That was us now, Not the scared girl at her father's funeral, not the mafia boss with a debt to repay. Just us, Dante and Isabel, husband and wife, partners, parents-to-be. Exactly as we were meant to be. At my father's funeral, a mafia boss handed me a ring. This was meant for you. He was right. It was. The end.